Hey everybody, Bill Reinecke here with parentingwithgrace.com, and I'm bringing you this part 2 of parenting teenagers and bad teenage behaviors is a parenting nightmare. And I'm just here to tell you that difficult teenage behaviors or bad teenage behaviors can make parenting teenagers a nightmare or very difficult. And yet I'm also here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way, and to hopefully give you some hope and just a little bit of insight of things you can do in those difficult situations. So in this video, we're going to look at parenting teenagers in your home. Now, I really stress in your home because a lot of times when we're dealing with teenagers and we're dealing with these behaviors that can sometimes be very aggressive, they can be very chronic, and that they just don't end, and it's a day in, day out struggle. It can be difficult, and I deal with a lot of parents who feel that maybe their teenagers would be better off somewhere else, in maybe a different setting, or a lot of different things, and people even think of residential treatment. And so I like to really work with parents and do everything we can to keep their family together and keep their children in their home. And the thing about it is, your teenager will do better in their living environment with their family in spite of the difficulties you may be facing. So I like to focus on, dealing with these difficult behaviors in the home. Now, the answer to addressing bad behaviors is really closer than you think. Sometimes when we're working with teenagers, and we're parenting teenagers, and we're dealing with those difficult teenage behaviors, we think about disciplining, and we it's natural, I think, as parents to jump to that place of what do we do to discipline our teenager. And there's got to be something we've got to do. There's got to be some kind of consequences about their bad teenage behavior or their aggressive teenage behavior. But the thing about it is that there's always something to that is a solution to that is a lot closer than you might think. Now, what I really want to stress is, don't overthink this. A lot of times it's really easy as parents to start thinking about situations, thinking about different things, and we start to really, I think, overthink it from the standpoint that we just don't have a lot of information. And so we really need to partner with our teenagers in those difficult situations, especially when we're dealing with those bad teenage behaviors. So the question I get a lot from parents that I work with is, how do I deal with a difficult teenage behavior? A lot of times I'll have parents that'll just look at me starstruck, and they really are hopeless. They feel that they've tried everything, and they've just really don't know where to turn. And so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have the answers. The answer, as I mentioned a minute ago, lies a lot closer than you think, and that's what we want to look at in this video. Parents of teens are left feeling hopeless and in a place of not knowing what to do, and that's really kind of a normal kind of feeling, and I want to just really stress that is normal to feel that way. But before you get into this, there are some things that you need to do that I mentioned in the first video, and in case you didn't see it, there's 5 things I mentioned that are really helpful, especially when you're dealing with those difficult teenage behaviors. And that is to take a minute. When you walk into a situation, even when your teenager may be yelling and screaming, as hard as it may be, remove yourself from that situation for a minute. Even 30 to 60 seconds to just take a breath and kind of regroup can mean the difference between you becoming increasingly frustrated, the situation growing out of control, and things going in a direction that you really don't want. The second thing is, don't engage in the argument or the bad behavior. So just don't engage, and so if they're directing something at you, or they're giving challenging you in a way, you don't have to engage in that. So I'm not saying ignore your teenager, but I am saying that it's best not to engage in that, because you're not going to win. It's a lose-lose situation. And then you want to remain calm and rational. So the first 2 things I mentioned are really 2 steps to remaining calm and keeping that rationale. and being rational. And then have a plan. And so, having that plan can look like a lot of different things. And, maybe how you're going to, set a limit or set a boundary, or maybe in the way of doing that, it's specific to your teenager. So that takes some thought. Part of that plan might be, just redirecting them to, taking a minute and just saying, you know what, we're going to come back in 5 minutes and we can talk about this. That's not to say that the behaviors that you just encountered or that you're forgetting about those, but what it's saying is that it brings you back to a place, hopefully in 5 or 10 minutes or maybe longer, or at some future point that you've agreed on, that you can address this. So that's one plan. So the plans can look like a lot of different things. And then the fifth thing that I mentioned in that first video is that you don't want to take the behavior personally, even if it's being directed at you. So, your teenager may be extremely angry and you're experiencing a bad teenage behavior because, maybe they had a bad day at school, or, their boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with them. And so this anger gets directed at you, and they can put the blame on you in a myriad of different ways. So, don't take that personally. And just, again, that's where you want to maybe take that minute and take another minute and step back. So those are 5 things that I mentioned yesterday, and that will help you to hopefully not feel like you're in a corner and you don't know what to do. So and quite honestly, out there, when you look around and as parents reach out, there's not a lot of help. And when it comes to parenting teenagers, you reach out to people and, everybody's got some kind of an antidote or something they did with their teenagers. But quite honestly, you and your teenager are very unique. And so you are the expert on your teenager, and they're the expert on what their needs are, which is something we're going to talk about in just a moment. A lot of professionals that, I come across take an approach of services. And what I mean by this is they plug families into programs such as therapy and parenting groups. There's nothing wrong with therapy or parenting groups or any kind of services. Don't get me wrong, and I in fact I advocate and help people access those kinds of services all the time, and it can be really helpful. It's not always the best first line of defense, and so what I mean by that is that as a parent, you are perfectly capable of really peeling through the different layers of difficulties you're facing in the way of needs. And the best way to do this is by just asking questions and kind of trying to find out what's going on with your teenager and address those bad teenage behaviors or those difficult behaviors that we often see in our teenagers. Now, I've used the term bad behaviors. Notice I haven't said bad teenagers. I don't believe that there is a bad child or a bad teenager, but I feel that and strongly believe that the behaviors that we encounter are the result of unmet needs. And so behaviors are unmet needs. And I'm not referring to basic needs like food, shelter, clothing, and those sorts of things, but I'm talking about unmet needs in just different areas of life. And so when we meet those needs, what I've found is that the behaviors go away. The behaviors are addressed when we meet that need. When we try to directly address a behavior, we find a lot of resistance because we're not addressing the need. And that need is not always being communicated with you or anybody else, and so we continue to experience these behaviors. So by developing a relationship and a communication with your teenager in a way that can help you identify what these needs are, and maybe they can't even tell you directly, but by identifying them through communication, you can address them and help to alleviate some of these or most of the behaviors that you will see. Now, a lot of the behaviors at that point, once you've addressed the unmet needs, become natural or age-appropriate teenage behaviors. So parenting teenagers can be very difficult, but it can also, once you start to figure out this process of finding out what the unmet needs are, it can become very easy, and it doesn't have to be as daunting and difficult and hopeless as perhaps you once thought it was. So once you find the need, you address the behavior. And so it's so important. Now, when I'm talking about these needs, they can be any number of things. It could be that, there's something going on at school that's overflowing into home life, or I was working with this young man who had really experienced a lot of difficult behaviors, some bad behaviors, and he was a great kid. Really loved working with him. And so as I worked with him, what I found was that what he really wanted to do was he wanted to be back with some of his family. And there had been some real damaging things that had taken place in his family and some things that he had done. And so once we discovered that, that's really where I think therapy was very helpful. So we were able to help him mend some of those relationships, and he was able to have those relationships that were just really undermining his well-being and really driving a lot of his behaviors. And so it was a very complex situation, and I'm just kind of giving you the gist of it. But once we identified that and advocated for those restored relationships and worked with his family, then that's where services were very helpful. I don't think going into that, not knowing that, and having a relationship with him and being able to create that safe place for him to be able to communicate that any perhaps a therapist could have got there, but I don't think services would have got to that place. And I say that because they had been tried in the past, and I had been told that none of them worked. But once we found out what that unmet need was, then we were really able to work on that need. And so today I can tell you that that young person's doing really well. There's still a history, but there's relationships there, and they're doing remarkably well. So that's just an example of what that need is. Maybe the unmet need is just an insecurity that maybe your teenager's going through as they go through the different stages of development in their life, and they don't know how to talk about it. So maybe the need is just that safe space to be able to communicate and talk about it. So again, that's maybe where therapy would come in handy, and being able to develop that communication. So and it's important too, if you're dealing with these difficult behaviors, to get an assessment. But I like to really help parents address things right in their home, because that's where you're facing the conflict. So I really would like it if you would like this video and subscribe to this channel. As I bring out more videos, you'll be able to be notified when they come out. And also visit us at parentingwithgrace.com, and if you have any questions or comments, put them down below this video, or if you'd like to ask me a question directly, you can go to parentingwithgrace.com, and we have a comment box there, or a question box I should say, and you can contact me through that, and I will respond to you personally. So until the next video, have a wonderful day, and large success to your parenting.